I believe that every movie adheres to the 29-point story structure. No matter if the writer outlines first or if they dive in blind, the end product follows the same 29 beats. Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest is my 42nd piece of evidence. So we have here the rarefied sequel that exceeds the impossible expectations set by the freshman outing, like a cinematic Pikachu Libre. I watched the opening 15 minutes several times, then later rocked out to Cutler Beckett's theme song. How I went all this time without watching it is beyond my understanding of reason and logic. Gore Verbinski dialed up every aspect of the first movie, from the visual effects and storytelling to the emotional arcs and world building. The actors settled into the roles and clearly had the best time of their lives, because all that joy is almost tangible through the screen. But the stars would never have aligned for the cast and crew without first crafting their tale on the 29-point story structure. Let's begin. A tight focus on the core elements of the protagonist's personality, inner conflict, and situation. We start in epic fashion at Elizabeth's rained-out wedding, and the arrest of her and Beau Will Turner for the release of Jack Sparrow, who just happens to be making another impossibly legendary escape and finds himself facing yet another mutiny as his behavior grows increasingly erratic. Where, why, and how the protagonist exist in their world, with a focus on why they don't quite fit in. Lord Beckett leverages Will's death sentence to force his service as an agent of the East India Trading Company, while Bootstrap Bill bubbles up from the depths to provide exposition on Jack's arrangement with Davy Jones. A singular event that's never happened before, and is destined to lead the characters away from their status quo. Bootstrap Bill tags Jack with the mark that Davy Jones's Kraken will follow. An examination of what's different in light of the something new was the same in spite of it in relation to the status quo. Jack rouses the crew to burn rubber towards the nearest shore, and Will accepts Lord Beckett's deal in hopes of ducking the hangman. The discovery that things are less than ideal, or an exploration of how badly things are. Will finds the Black Pearl run ashore and lifeless, and the island inhabited by a cannibal tribe, who has chosen Jack as their demigod chief. Characters dedicate their effort to a specified goal, which is smaller in scope than the primary objective of the third act. Governor Swan angles his resources to keep Elizabeth from facing the gallows, while Elizabeth pulls a Jack Sparrow and negotiates her way into another misadventure. A brief checklist of the story elements needed for the second act. A steady sprinkling of old faces with new purposes, the specter of one's own mortality, the gravity and allure of the Black Pearl, and Jack running away from it all. The singular event that launches the characters into the wild jungle of the second act, also called an oh shit moment. Jack's escape is foiled, and he's doomed to be eaten. Oh shit. Characters must learn all new rules and expectations distinct to this adventure. The crew operates far beyond their normal surroundings, navigating a hostile terrain and impossibly overpowered odds. Characters showcase their ability to grow in the areas this adventure requires, typically through external means. Through teamwork and ingenuity, the crew break free of their cage and make it to the Pearl. And through dumb luck and calculated charm, Jack manages to stay a step ahead of his digestive fate. And also, Ragetti and Pentel ease right back into the crew, right where they belong. Characters face legitimate and understandable reasons to deviate from their stated convictions, agendas, or desires. Will detours from his quest to free Elizabeth from jail to join Jack's quest for Davy Jones's chest, while Elizabeth once again lies her way onto the deck of a ship and must Arya Stark her way amid a watchful, thirsty crew. Then Mr. Gibbs fills in some gaps in the lore of Davy Jones, unsettled as always. An escalation of problems that vex the characters. Tia Dalma anoints Will as a chosen one archetype for narrative purposes moving forward, then reveals the final bit of Davy Jones's lore and how Jack plays into it, while Jack just can't help being Jack, no matter how dire his circumstances are. Quite the irredeemable trait. Characters evolve internally by utilizing everything they've gathered and learned. The crew finds where it can find the Flying Dutchman. Will skitters aboard to experience the soon-to-be damned for himself, and Davy Jones finally arrives in the story after Jack's hard-fought search. Journey-weary characters reconcile the reality of their ongoing situation with who they were in the first act. Davy Jones confronts Jack about the debt he owes for the Black Pearl, pulling Will deeper into the sordid affairs of Jack's wheeling and dealing in chaos, while Elizabeth uses her femininity to steer her way towards Jack, and our revisit to Tortuga produces far too few damned or corrupted souls. A singular event that strikes at the protagonist's core conflict. Norrington catches up with Jack yet again, this time as a damnable and corrupted soul, and there's no turning back from here. Characters find needed answers for both external and internal conflicts. Jack's consequences come crashing back to him like chaotic gravity, and Will's mission aboard the Flying Dutchman unites father and son. The clarified objective is realized in part or in whole, though it's meaningless without the completion of the primary objective. Will receives hints that he's on the right path for the key, but there's a curse attached to the end game, because of course there is. Elizabeth catches up with Jack, but the arrival of a new soul at this particular moment is a really bad idea. An existential conflict that wounds the character's sense of self, worldly identity, or their journey. Governor Swan is pressed into the personal service of Lord Beckett, as land-born politics quickly gobble up power. Will challenges Davy Jones to a round of liar's dice, wagering his eternal servitude. Then Davy Jones reveals the location of the key, and Bootstrap steps in to guarantee a victory for Will. An undeniable win for the protagonist, typically in direct connection to the Rebirth. Will gets his intel and his permission to leave the ship, steals the key, then swears not to abandon his father to Davy Jones. A grand loss directly connected to the character's newfound inability to quit the journey. Jack discovers the maneuverings of Beckett from the shadows in Norrington's very presence. Elizabeth wrestles with why the compass keeps pointing to Jack. Then Will discovers that Elizabeth is roaming free, just as the Flying Dutchman catches up to him for punishment. A thematic freefall, tied directly to the heavy price. Davy Jones calls his Kraken, and we're treated to tentacle destruction porn. Elizabeth uses her femininity to seduce Jack into a different way of thinking, and the fabled chest is found. A singular event that robs the protagonist of seemingly any chance of success. Davy Jones arrives and dispatches his amphibious crew. Characters cannot return to their starting personas and must turn to face the primary objective. Three men with three needs fight over one object, while Rigetti and Pentel round the morality bases and talk themselves into the righteousness of theft, and Davy Jones's crew enters the fray. Characters move towards a climax while utilizing the major swings and sneaky misdirections of the story. Jack takes possession of his movie-long obsession. Greed creates several red herrings and empty vessels. Jack attempts yet another negotiation with Davy Jones, and the Kraken is called again. The final confrontation between the protagonist and the antagonistic force. Jack discovers his critical error and promptly books it. While Will coordinates a defense against a mythological monster, Jack redeems his honor through the guilt planted by Elizabeth, and the crew abandons the Black Pearl for a desperate dash to shore. The singular event where the protagonist finally confronts their place in the status quo. Jack is chained to the consequences of his actions, led to his fate through deception, guile, and a woman. The direct aftermath of the climax. Jack gets out of his restraints just in time to go down swinging. The consequences of the climax in relation to other characters and the status quo. Davy Jones discovers his own critical error, and Norrington delivers the beating heart to Beckett. A tight focus on the protagonist contrasted from the opening. The crew shelters with Tia Dalma and mourn the death of Jack. Then Tia equips them with the mission to retrieve Jack from the dead in Undead Barbossa. And there you have it. My 40-second example to support my argument that all movies follow the exact same story structure, regardless of how the writer approaches their craft. Dead Man's Chest, like the previous installment, adhered closely to every step of the 29-point story structure. But does this supernatural swashbuckling adventure follow the same plot beats as a gritty action flick that reimagined Saul Goodman as John Wick? Yes, it arguably does. Next on my docket, Nobody. Please subscribe to stay up to date with this and future videos, and please like and comment with your thoughts and reactions. I'll talk at you next time.